The American dream of owning your own home is a lie that has been sold to you by the banks. I really am not a big advocate for you buying your own home. I'd rather you rent where you live and own
Exactly.
where you rent to other people. If you're adamant about owning something, well, then you focus first on acquiring enough assets that can pay for the liability that is your personal residence. Because the only winners are the banks if you're residing in your own property.
Yeah.
Banks win. The reality is this. Let's assume that you got an amazing deal on interest rate. Let's say you got a 5% interest rate right now. Right now is amazing. 3 years ago, that would be horrible, right? But right now,
Right.
that's an amazing deal on interest rate. Let's assume that you got a 5% interest rate on a 30-year mortgage and you acquired, let's say, a $400,000 property. Anahi, can you pull up a mortgage calculator for me online? What I'd like to see is a $400,000 property at 5% interest amortized over 30 years. Oh, George put 21, 47, 29. George is faster than you, Anahi. Here's the reality. How much of that is interest? Anahi, can you see the interest amount for the first year on that mortgage
George
calculator?
said 1666.67.
How much interest is paid over the first 7 years? About $139,000 of interest over the first 7 years, because amortization front loads your interest rate. So everyone's focus is on that 5%. The reality is most Americans who own a home will own it for less than 10 years. They'll buy a property, keep it for 7 on average, sell it, buy a new property. They just spent $139,000 on a $400,000 loan. What's the actual interest they paid? It's not 5%. It's only 5% if you kept it for 30 years. It is only 5% if you keep the loan for 30 years. The banks win in the American dream because it's a lie. So you want to become the bank so that you can win. The only way to do that is you own the property, you rent it to someone else. Because then I don't care about the mortgage. Why? Because the tenant's paying it. I'm not paying it. Because here's the thing. Financial freedom is about cash flow. If you're living in the property, it is not an asset. It is a liability. And all you're doing is making the banks wealthy. I really, really hate the IRS. You guys know this. But I also hate the banks. It's been this manipulation that they put into society that, oh, you have to own your home where you live. You have to own it. You have to own it. That's the American dream. No, that makes them wealthy because they know you're not going to live there for 30 years. The average person who buys a home in the United States owns it for less than 10 years. So you end up paying a ridiculous amount of interest from an interest rate standpoint, because the reality is you sell it, buy a new one, sell it, buy a new one, sell it, buy a new one. Banks become wealthy.